look at Renzo Navarro as a player. This is a player you probably recognize because they were the Pokemon Players Cup 4 champion and also the highest ranking player from Latin America in PC4 to qualify them to play in the Pokemon Global Exhibition. But not only that, Renzo has a bunch of other accomplishments under their belt, and that team of Pokemon, it looks pretty solid going into this Series 11 showdown.
I mean, of course you're going to be the highest ranked player from your region when you win the whole thing, and that was a fantastic showing. I was really enjoying watching it all the way through. The run through the losers bracket gave me a whole lot of joy, but then the performances and being able to claw back from those situations where games look lost and really trying to find those win conditions is something that I think is going to be really important. And I think that the team here has a really good number of options to do that. You've got board positioning with the Incineroar, making sure you've got it in the back, landing these Intimidates sometimes when you need them on something like the opposing Groudon. That Umbreon as well, which was really popular amongst European players last time we had a format like this, kind of picked up by Renzo and said, yeah, actually, this gave me really good control of the games, or gave my opponents really good control of the games. I'm just going to do it myself. So really nice team there from Renzo.
For sure, but hey, it's like we're seeing double here, because if you pull up Leonardo Bonanomi's accomplishments and team, the team is the exact same 6. So we will definitely talk about that in a little bit, but you have to give so much credit to this player because they were a Players Cup 4 finalist for the European the top seeded player in the European region for PC4, which also qualified them to participate in the global exhibition. But just because it's the same 6 Pokemon, Adam, doesn't necessarily mean that they have the exact same moves.
No, there could be varieties in there, and while we're looking at Leonardo's accomplishments, I think the fact he's been a finalist in 2 Players' Cups shows just what a quality player he is, and he knows how to build those teams. He was one of those Europeans kind of leading the charge with a team very similar to this last time we saw it out, so when it comes to expertise on how to use it, I think there may be a slight upper hand there, because he's just got a little bit more kind of experience in running that team. A whole lot of gameplay with a team similar to this should give him some really good kind of reads on maybe what his opponent's going to do and how he can respond to that with the team under his own control.
Well, let's go ahead and see exactly how both of these trainers are going to pilot the exact same 6 Pokemon as we get into our very first game of this match. Ooh, I'm so excited because I think that in a situation like this, it heavily matters what your lead Pokemon are going to be. And for Leonardo, he will be leading with that Regieleki and that Charizard, but on Renzo's side, you've got the Charizard and the Venusaur. And I find this really interesting because Venusaur typically has that chlorophyll ability that is going to allow it to double its speed in the sun, and Charizard can do you can switch in something like the Groudon there to maybe set the sun, but Charizard can also itself do a lot of damage in its Gigantamax form.
Both trainers really want the sun in play here, just to make sure that the Charizard and the Venusaur, both candidates to be G-maxed as well, are in the best position to be able to play out the game. What's really interesting here from Leonardo's side, though, is he did show that Regieleki early, saying, hey, if your Charizard comes to the field, it is going to be threatened, and that's exactly what we see here. So Leonardo, I think, maybe getting the better of the lead and forcing a switch. If he reads into this, this could be a really big problem for Renzo.
Absolutely. You are going to see the Groudon switch in as Regieleki goes for the Electro Web. It's not going to be effective on that Groudon, but it is going to do a decent amount of damage to that Venusaur, dropping its speed, even though it does have that speed buff, which will go first here. The Charizard on Leonardo's side getting put to sleep right away.
Really nicely done there by Renzo. Knew, of course, that the Charizard had to leave, knew that it wasn't safe to be sat on the field, and making a smart switch to the Groudon. Leonardo, though, plays it wisely, doesn't go after it with something like the Thunderbolt, does decide to Electro Web and try and slow down that Venusaur, but there we get to see how impactful Chlorophyll is. Yes, the Groudon switch may have been a little bit obvious, but you still got to activate Chlorophyll. Didn't throw out the G-Max, kept that for a little bit later on, and managed to land that Sleep Powder. So now Leonardo, his G-Max candidate on the field in Charizard is asleep. He can't G-Max it right now, and that may give Renzo a little bit of wiggle room to throw up something like the Vine Lash between turns and start racking up this damage. But for now, Renzo's more focused on getting stuff to sleep and trying to call a switch there.
Yeah, and I think what's also dangerous for Leonardo is Charizard now has its solar power ability activated, so it's going to be taking chip damage at the end of every turn under harsh sunlight, but it's not going to be taking chip damage if it just gets knocked out there by a fantastic Rock Slide coming in from that Groudon on Renzo's side.
And Groudon being able to put the same kind of pressure down on a Charizard that the Regieleki does, saying, I have an easy way to knock you out, and now you're asleep. I think Renzo made a good call there in trying to throw down another Sleep Powder, just assuming it may switch out and save itself for later. But now he gets to see a little bit more of what Leo has bought. Seeing that Venusaur on the field definitely helps him, I think, plan out the rest of the game. Maybe save something like his Charizard for later, or maybe try and find a way to slow down that opposing Venusaur, because both of them are going to be able to take advantage of Chlorophyll, but most importantly, the Venusaur on Renzo's side has been caught by an Electro Web, so it is going to be slower, and that does give Leonardo's Venusaur, in the mirror match between the two of them, the slight advantage that it may need to really deal with it. So a lot to think about for both trainers, but they're holding back on these G-Maxes, not trying to get that residual damage down early, which is something we often see from players who want to make sure that for all 4 turns of it, they're going to be able to land that damage.
Ooh, Venusaur on Leonardo's side showing off that it does have Weather Ball, so that Venusaur, which was a great candidate for Gigantamax on Renzo's side, is just going to be knocked out here as Regieleki goes for the Volt Switch, but it's not going to be able to get out because Groudon is going to be immune to that. So Groudon can fire back with a Precipice Blades, which does hit both Pokemon and knocks out Leonardo's Regieleki.
That's a whole lot of kind of exchanging Pokemon very haphazardly, I think, from both trainers. Yes, the Venusaur goes down, but you don't get to remove your Regieleki from play if you're Leonardo, and you just get caught by the Precipice Blades on the way out. So that does leave Renzo in the 3-2 Pokemon advantage, and the Venusaur really, really low down on health as well. Yes, it's going to have its Chlorophyll for a little bit longer. It's going to be able to do a whole lot with that, but it does kind of mean, you know, we get to see if we're going to be G-maxing on both of these Pokemon side, it's going to be a Gigantamax Charizard versus a Gigantamax Venusaur. The other option has already been taken away, so that matchup becomes a little bit obvious how it's going to go as the game plays out. And Renzo still has one more Pokemon tucked away in the back should he need it, so this game could turn very quickly. Now the Groudon's been caught in, this switch could be quite nice for Renzo.
Yeah, we can see that Renzo is going to cycle in the Incineroar here, which is going to be very useful to drop the attack of the Groudon on the other side of the field, as it is a physical attacker. And maybe Renzo can also get a little lucky because Precipice Blades and Rock Slide, they don't have 100% accuracy either when it comes to some of the moves that a Groudon would like to run. But we're also going to see a Gigantamax here for the very first time. It is going to be the Charizard getting Gigantamaxed on Renzo's side of the field. And something that I thought was really interesting about the moveset selection from that Charizard is that you actually saw that it had Hurricane, which is an interesting decision, but it also makes a lot of sense because Hurricane for a Charizard Max Airstream is actually 140 base power versus the Air Slash, which is 130. But look at this. Leonardo's also going to Dynamax here, and it's that Groudon that just took that attack drop from the Incineroar switch in on Renzo's side.
It has to be the Groudon, though, for Leo, because he's in this position where the Venusaur is so low already, it's not going to be able to get complete value out of all of these kind of turns of Gigantamax. So just accepting that, throwing down, of course, that, you know, the Leaf Storm, just trying to get some damage down, the Incineroar switch becomes even more valuable here. And this is a really good turn for Renzo, knowing that he's going to get that residual damage down, getting the big hit from the G-Max Wildfire into the Groudon. Really important there, I think. And now we get to see how much Groudon can do back. After the Intimidate, I still think this could be dangerous, but the G-Max Wildfire residual damage is there, and that's going to be really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Groudon with that Max Rockfall can set the weather, but Charizard is still standing at the moment, and take a look at the G-Max Wildfire damage. It's doing so much. Venusaur is on its last legs right now. But it was a critical survival for that Charizard, knowing that that -1 attack drop on that Groudon was what saved it.
Yeah, and Charizard, not taking any residual damage between turns, giving away a little bit of Renzo's strategy there. I love the max airstream option that he's hovering here, just to try and make sure, and really, things looking a bit bleak for Leo. The Groudon, the damage is reduced and is only going to have 2 more turns of its Dynamax. Incineroar making sure the Venusaur goes down, doesn't land anything in the meantime. Yeah, this game looking like a solid comeback from Renzo from the earlier scoreline. Groudon is just hanging on, but it's got to work its way through 3 Pokemon on Renzo's side of the field, and at the same time not take any damage in addition to the G-Max Wildfire that's going to be working on it between turns.
Yeah, we can see the Max Quake come through here. Incineroar is going to get knocked out, but that still leaves Renzo with another Pokemon to be able to deal with this very, very low Groudon on Leonardo's side of the field. But take a look, G-Max Wildfire damage is going to come through. Groudon does survive here, but now Renzo can just bring in their own Groudon.
Yep, and the downfall, I guess, and I know it's a silly downfall, but the fact that these moves are only single target when you're Dynamax, there's no spread moves really available. You can't take out both the Charizard and the Groudon in this turn, so one of them's going to land the damage, and even if one of them doesn't, guess what? You're going to be caught by the residual damage between turns. That's why these moves have been so impactful in these formats where Charizard, where Venusaur really do rule in their Gigantamax forms, and I think the difference maker in this one may just be the fact that Renzo managed to get his down, get his residual damage ticking over between turns, keep the game moving along, keep the knockouts rolling, and Leonardo was just never quite able to get there with that one as well. So looks like this game is going to be wrapped up in this turn, and Leonardo throws in the towel quite nicely there. So back to the drawing board for Leonardo as the set is neatly leveled up at 1-1.
Yeah, this is really, really great piloting coming in from Renzo. At the very beginning of that game 1, it did look like Leonardo was in had a little bit of an edge, right? Forced Renzo to make this switch during turn number 1. Felt like Renzo, needed to cycle through a couple of different Pokemon in order to find their footing again. But Leonardo just, I feel like, couldn't keep up with the amount of damage that Renzo was dishing out time after time after time.
You mentioned that turn 1, and I do think that's quite important, actually. I think that the momentum on turn 1, Leo kind of knew about the switch. You don't leave the Charizard in against the Regieleki, and the Groudon's in the back, so that's a very obvious, easy switch in. I feel like that switch wasn't really punished enough. It was left a little bit alone, a safe Electro Web. Of course, when the Sleep Powder goes down, it really does go from bad to worse there, and being able to say, you know what, that Charizard is now out of the game. I mean, the Charizard really didn't get to do anything. The Groudon switch in needed to be punished because the Groudon bought the Rock Slide to polish off that Charizard in the following turn. So that turn one maybe a little slow from Leonardo, maybe not going for it enough, maybe needed something a little bit more to try and get after it and go from there. But the Groudon was never really answered after it switched in. It switched out, Incineroar did its work, and I think maybe back to the drawing board a little bit if you're in Leonardo's shoes. He's definitely got the tools to do it. I mean, he's just lost to the same team, so kind of needs to run it back on Renzo a little bit here.
Well, the score line is 1-1 now as we get into our game number 3 and see what adjustments these players can make. And when I'm taking a look at Leonardo's team specifically, there was a really key piece of information that Renzo revealed during that game. It was the fact that Charizard is actually carrying safety goggles for Renzo. So it wasn't taking damage from the sand, and that means that something like a Sleep Powder, if Venusaur is carrying that, is not going to work either onto that specific Pokemon.
I thought that was a really vital piece to give up, and when it took the rock fall and was then able to keep sticking around, you think, oh, the residual damage will get it, but it didn't end up taking it down, and that is a huge reveal. I'm sure Leonardo's made a note of that and is able to say, you know what, I know exactly what's going on here. Then that's going to be really vital, and maybe that's why the Venusaur is going to have to be played a little bit differently. These leads on the field, though, I do like them from both trainers. I like them except to the Umbreon from Renzo, but Charizard Regieleki can put down a huge amount of damage if left unchecked, and Renzo may have the defensive option, but is going to have to try and weather quite the storm coming in.
Well, it looks like Leonardo doesn't want to put the gas on just yet, is going to be removing that Regieleki, saving it for a little bit later, as it's Groudon's time to shine, or more accurately, maybe Charizard's Solar Power's time to shine, as we do see a Gigantamax coming out on the field, and that's just going to allow Leonardo to do so much big damage when it comes to getting off those G-Max Wildfires, and also those Max Airstreams, and maybe something else that might be up this particular Charizard's sleeve. Who knows what exact moveset they are running on this, because it is a closed team sheet.
Well, the G-Max Wildfire is starting out just what I'd expect, and that's switching really nice. Umbreon is great as a defensive pivot, but that is a little bit too much. The gas only turned on by the Charizard here, and really nicely done there by Leonardo to just say, wait, you got your G-Max Wildfire down super early last game. I'm going to get mine down even earlier. Well, he didn't get his down that early, but he got it down, and now he's got it down. The Solar Power, the addition of the Groudon, really neatly done. Of course, there is going to be an issue with getting that residual damage down on the fire types, but at least it puts a bit of threat on the Groudon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that you can take a look at and realize is a pretty big threat when it comes to either of these teams. Obviously, Groudon is one of the more critical pieces to be able to help enable some of the key partner Pokemon that are on both of these teams, but it also pressures out a ton of damage, especially when you take a look at how it interacts with Incineroar, Regieleki, and also Charizard.
These teams, the fact it's a mirror and they're playing it very differently each time certainly is interesting. We got to take a look at Renzo's 4 when he went into the menu to select Pokemon to replace Umbreon, and knowing that the Venusaur stayed in the back and didn't come to this game seems interesting because it was so impactful for him in game number 1. The switch up to Umbreon there just didn't pay off, and I think it may put him quite behind the pace. He is trying to catch right back up though with the G-Max of his own. I think that's a very smart decision. The sun's been set up for you already by the Groudon. Get catching up as best you can and try and really make your way back into the game with maybe a huge G-Max Wildfire of your own.
Well, it is going to be a Max Guard first, but that does deny the Max Airstream from Leonardo's Charizard, so no speed buff on the field. But we will see Groudon go for a nice attack into the Incineroar, and also a flinch from that Rock Slide.
That's not really what you want when you're Renzo in that turn. You need the Incineroar to try and get something out there. Maybe another Snarl, maybe even a parting shot to try and get out, but that Incineroar is now just stuck on the field taking damage. It's not taking the residual damage, which is nice, but it's not getting anything done either. Of course, Renzo being a little bit aware there of the opposing Charizard, saying, you know what, I could get quite hurt here, and I could get caught by a Rock Slide as well. Trying to play the speed game, though, and getting a Max Airstream down of his own. Not enough for the knockout, though, and that could be very problematic.
Yeah, especially because we saw how slow that Incineroar was in respect to that Groudon that last turn. Groudon is also going to be able to heal up from the Citrus Berry that was revealed in our last game, but also Leonardo's Charizard is going to be going for a Max Airstream, and that's going to do a decent chunk out of Renzo's Charizard, but remember, it is also at -1 because of the Snarl.
The Snarl's helping a little bit there, but I don't think that's the problem. I think the fact that now the speeds are tied, Incineroar does nothing to stop, of course, this Groudon. The Rock Slide lands once again, and Charizard easily felled. It's been 2 games where Charizards have been caught with huge amounts of damage and just easily knocked out very, very promptly. So these Groudons are putting in a lot of work and kind of give you these double options. Finally get the parting shot out of the Incineroar, but is it a little bit too little too late? I mean, it's got to come right back in. It's not going to have premium options, of course, for the, dealing with the rest of these Pokemon, and a whole lot of pressure applied to Renzo's Groudon now to try and see out the game.
Yeah, something that I actually really like about that pivot from the Incineroar is the fact that you can get the Incineroar back in and get another attack drop onto Leonardo's Groudon, but I almost feel like it is a little too late when it comes to the position that Leonardo is in this game 3. At least Gigantamax is over, so that is not a threat that Renzo's going to have to deal with for the rest of this game. But you've got to put a lot of eggs into that Groudon basket if you're Renzo, and make sure that you can get off enough damage.
And that Groudon's also going to be slower than the opposing Groudon. It wasn't on the field when the Max Airstream landed, so Leonardo just has an advantage kind of all across the board, really. In that, his Charizard's going to be the fastest thing on the field, then his Groudon, and now he just gets to play it safe and dodge this fake out turn. I love that Renzo is capitalizing on it. but I still think it's going to be so hard for him to get this Groudon to lay down the damage that it needs to, especially with another Pokemon in the back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really what Renzo was hoping for here was to be able to get one knockout and hope that that Swords Dance was going to be enough to be able to hit both opposing Pokemon. But, you know, even if you go for... I guess you kind of have to do Rock Slide here. Hope that it's going to be enough. Hope it doesn't miss. But Charizard's going to go for Blast Burn first, right onto the Groudon. And that is plenty to be able to knock it out.
The speed disadvantage there meant that Groudon never stood a chance. It was also going to get followed up on by the opposing Groudon. So really clean game from Leonardo. And that turn 1, where he just takes out the Umbreon, really set the tone for the rest of the game. He's never looked in danger. You know, he switched in this Groudon to pair it up with the Charizard, and they sat on the field for the rest of the